Wasted career. That's what some people whispered when Ernie Banks died at 83. But how can a man with 512 home runs, 2 MVP awards, and a Presidential Medal of Freedom be called a waste? The truth is way more complex. Behind that famous smile and "let's play too" catchphrase was a man fighting battles most fans never knew about. Ernie Banks became known as Mr. Cub for good reason. He played his entire career from 1953 to 1971 with the Chicago Cubs. He hit 512 home runs and won back-to-back MVP awards in 1958 and 1959. He made it to the Hall of Fame in 1977. Banks had this amazing ability to stay positive. His famous phrase, "let's play too," made him a symbol of hope for Cubs fans who had waited decades for success. He seemed like the happiest man in baseball, but that cheerful image hid some serious struggles. Banks faced racism in a segregated America. He dealt with painful injuries that changed his whole career. He battled with a mean manager who tried to destroy him, and his personal life was full of drama that followed him to his grave. When Banks started playing, baseball was still mostly white. Jackie Robinson had broken the color barrier in 1947, but many teams moved slowly. Chicago was especially tough for black players. One official called it the most segregated city in the United States in the 1950s. Banks came from the Negro Leagues, playing for the Kansas City Monarchs. The Cubs bought his contract for just $15,000. On September 17, 1953, he became the first black player in Cubs history. He was only 22 years old. Banks later said something that shows how isolated he had been. "During my half-month stay with the Cubs in September 1953, I met more white people than I'd known in all my 22 years." He chose what people called quiet trailblazing. While other black athletes spoke out loudly about racism, Banks took a different path. He said, "I'm the man and I'll set my own patterns in life. I don't rely on anyone else's opinions. I look at a man as a human being. I don't care about his color." Some people criticized him for being too soft on racism. They wanted him to fight harder. But Banks believed in making change through his play and his character. He said, "I kept my mouth shut but tried to make a difference." This approach helped him gain acceptance, but it also drew criticism from those who wanted more vocal activism. Banks' body started breaking down from all the baseball he played. His biggest problem was his knees. He had hurt them during his time in the Army, and they got worse over the years. In 1961, after playing 717 straight games, his knee problems forced him to sit out. This ended his chance at setting a National League record. The Cubs moved him from shortstop to first base because his knees couldn't handle the demands of shortstop anymore. This position change was huge. Banks played more games at first base than shortstop during his career, but people still remember him best as that quick, athletic shortstop from his early years. Then came an even scarier injury. On May 25, 1962, former Cubs pitcher Mo Drabowski hit Banks in the head with a fastball. The impact knocked him unconscious. He spent 2 nights in the hospital with a concussion. Just 2 days after leaving the hospital, Banks came back and hit 3 home runs and a double. It seemed amazing, but reports said his offense began to suffer after this incident. He still hit 37 home runs that year, but other parts of his game declined. Back then, people didn't understand concussions like we do now. Brain injuries were often joked about or ignored. Banks' later diagnosis of dementia might have been connected to this head injury, but no one made that link at the time. In 1966, the Cubs hired Leo Durocher as manager. This created one of the worst player-manager relationships in baseball history. Durocher wrote a book called "Nice Guys Finish Last." Banks was the ultimate nice guy. They were complete opposites. Durocher hated Banks. He tried everything to get rid of him. He said cruel things like, he couldn't run, he couldn't field. Toward the end, he couldn't even hit. There was nothing wrong with Ernie that 2 new knees wouldn't have cured. Durocher complained that he couldn't remove Banks from the lineup because he was too popular. He even sent other players to pinch hit for Banks in situations where Banks should have batted. The media tried to get Banks to fight back, but he refused. When reporters asked about Durocher's criticism, Banks would say things like, "Leo Durocher is the best manager ever. He always took the high road." This wasn't weakness, it was strategy. Banks used his popularity as protection. He knew that fighting with Durocher in public would only hurt his image and give the manager more ammunition. While Banks was getting pushed around by his own manager, fans could still watch every game and cheer him on. Just like how you can catch every pitch in every moment with today's sponsor, Fubo. Don't miss the action. Sign up with our link and stream all your favorite teams live. Years later, in 1983, Durocher apologized. He was recovering from heart surgery and seemed to realize how badly he had treated Banks. But the damage was already done. Banks had spent years dealing with a manager who wanted him gone. Banks's private life was messier than his public image suggested. He got married 4 times and divorced 3 times. When he died, he was still in the middle of divorcing his 4th wife, Elizabeth. His first marriage to Molly Ector ended in 1959. She later sued him for not paying for a life insurance policy that was part of their divorce agreement. His last marriage troubles were the worst. Banks and Elizabeth separated in 2007. In 2012, he filed for divorce, claiming extreme and repeated acts of mental cruelty. But the divorce was still going on when he died in 2015. Banks's final months were shadowed by health problems and legal fights. In October 2014, he fell twice. After the second fall, doctors diagnosed him with severe global cognitive impairment, basically serious dementia. Just 3 days after this diagnosis, Banks signed a new will. This will cut out his wife and children completely. Instead, he left everything to his caregiver, Regina Rice. The will said this was not for a lack of love and affection for them and for reasons best known by them. When Banks died in January 2015, the fighting started immediately. Elizabeth claimed he died without a will. Regina filed the will she had. Banks's sons accused Rice of controlling their father and making it hard for them to see him. There was even a fight over Banks' burial. Elizabeth wanted him buried in a cemetery. Regina said he wanted to be cremated and have his ashes scattered at Wrigley Field. The court sided with Elizabeth. Here's the shocking part. Banks was a national icon, a Hall of Famer, and a Presidential Medal winner. But when he died, his estate was worth only $16,000. He owed the IRS $75,000 in back taxes. The Chicago Cubs had to pay his $35,000 funeral costs. This creates a sad picture. Banks brought joy to millions of fans, but he struggled with money his whole life. Some people said women looked at him as their cash cow and bled him dry. The timing of Banks' final will was suspicious. Illinois had just passed a law making it harder for caregivers to inherit large amounts from the people they care for. This law was supposed to start on January 1, 2015. Banks signed his will on October 17, 2014, just before the law took effect. If he had signed the will just a few months later, Regina Rice would have faced a much harder legal battle to keep his money. But here's what matters most. Through all these struggles, the racism, the injuries, the mean manager, the divorces, the money problems, the legal fights, Banks never lost his spirit in public. He kept smiling. He kept saying, "Let's play two." He kept being Mr. Cub. That wasn't fake. That was strength. Banks chose to handle his problems privately while giving fans the joy and hope they needed. Even when Leo Durocher was destroying him, Banks refused to fight back publicly. Even when his knees were killing him, he kept playing. Even when people took advantage of him financially, he stayed positive. His optimistic nature might have made him an easy target, but it also made him beloved by millions. Was Ernie Banks' career wasted? Not even close. He broke barriers for black players. He inspired millions of fans. He showed that you can face terrible struggles and still choose joy. His real story is more complex than the simple Mr. Cub image. Behind that smile was a man dealing with racism, injuries, conflict, and betrayal. But he chose to be remembered for his love of the game, not his problems. Let's Play 2 wasn't just about baseball. It was about facing each day with hope, even when life kept throwing fastballs at your head. Banks showed us that being strong doesn't mean being angry. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is smile when everyone expects you to break. That's the real legacy of Mr. Cub. Not a wasted career, but a life lived with grace under pressure.